These are the pencils that will be in your box by Monday. Some of you may have them already in your box, in which case you're welcome to start to use them on this assignment. I want to show you that at the back of each handle there is a numbering or lettering. Like you can see here, it says HB, there's a B, there's a 2B, a 4B, a 6B, and an 8B. We'll be using some of those today, but if you don't have those ones, you can still use just the regular yellow pencil to get us started. This exercise works best if you flip your board sideways so that your board is now oriented vertically. For the outlining phase, you could either use a yellow pencil or even better, use the HB if you have it in your box. You always want to make sure that you're drawing very lightly when you're doing an outline. Here I want to show you that you're drawing your strawberry the exact same size as the strawberry in the reference photo. So you want to make that exactly to size. You may go outside of your frame if you need to. One thing I want you to keep in mind for every drawing that you do is always start off lighter than you think. It is way easy to erase a line. It is much more difficult to have a heavy outline and have to try and erase that, or worse, leave it at the end of your drawing. A heavy outline will equal a flat form, which will mean it won't look three-dimensional. So always go light. I actually do my outlines with kind of a broken line so that it's not fully enclosed, which can help the illusion. When it comes time to draw the stem, it's important that you also take a look at the negative space. So here the negative space is the white area around each leaf. There's a shape there, and it's important that you start to see that and find it and visualize it. You can also look at the positive shapes that the leaves make as well. I know that's what I did too. And now you can see I've drawn my outline off camera. It's very light, nothing's solid yet, and my first step is to erase out any guidelines because I did a dividing line down the center line to make sure it was equal on both sides. And then you're going to go in and you're going to start to outline where those shadow areas are going to go. For this, I'm going to switch to a different pencil. I'm going to start to use the 2B at first because it's always better to go lighter than you think. So at first, I'm going to kind of do a block in, where I'm blocking in or just laying in where the darker values are going to be, and then I'm going to layer on top. Here I've drawn this on a separate piece of paper. It's just kind of a topo map of the strawberry, just the berry itself, not the stem, to show you kind of the areas where it's the darkest, and then it progressively moves into that light highlight, which is a circular kind of shape on there. One of our rules is that we always start with the dark areas first. So usually that's going to mean areas that are in shadow or areas that are kind of by nature keyed darker. So if the local value of the object is dark, then everything would be a little bit darker. Here I'm going to the form shadow first, and then I'm going to that nice cast shadow in a moment. And when you're doing this, you do want to think about wrapping your stroke around the form. You could hatch, which is what I'm doing here. I'm doing kind of a combination of the two. But most importantly, I'm going lighter than I think I'll have to go. And that's so that I don't have to worry about correcting something yet. In looking at that picture, there's a lot happening in the leaves. There's a lot of leaves that are kind of twisted, or you can see like the underside to a part of a leaf. You want to make sure you describe that accurately. That's fun. That's a challenge for you to try and do that. Those leaves have a particular shape. There's a little bit of a sawtooth to it, so pay attention to the shape of the leaf. Try and break it down into simple shapes and kind of puzzle them correctly together. I bounce my eye a lot between the reference photo and my drawing. Here I'm looking at the drawing, but one technique that I employ all the time is squinting and blurring my eyes. And I do that so that it's easier for my brain to isolate the values. So I'm just going to show you, I'm looking at a photo through the camera lens, and I'm just going to get that out of focus. That's what I do. I do that while I'm drawing. I do it throughout the drawing process, and I do it when I'm painting too. It's incredibly valuable. Now, the way I draw and also the way I paint is to start off really generalized. So I will go in and I will lightly shade an area, but then I'll go back and I'll start to refine it a little bit. So I'll go in there and get more specific information, making sure that things like my value relationships are correct. That's how one value looks compared to another value. And then I'll start to grab details, those really intense blacks. You can either do one of two things. You can avoid the charcoal and use the softest graphite, which is the 8B, and use pressure to get it to go dark. Or if you really like the look of the really dark, rich blacks, then you can use charcoal in combination with the graphite. So I like contrast, which means like contrast of light and dark in this instance. So I'm using a charcoal pencil. Some of you may have a charcoal pencil in your box. Otherwise, you could use that charcoal brick. And I'm kind of layering the charcoal on top of the graphite in places. And I'm using a blending stump, but only after I've done some really good shading underneath. I never want to put a blending stump on top of mediocre shading, and neither should you. So here I'm looking for all those dark areas that are happening both in the cast shadow on the ground plane there, but also in the leaves. There's some interesting shadows and some of the leaves themselves go quite dark, so I want to use the charcoal there. But again, you could get away with using the 8B and that could be the same, although maybe not as rich. For this video, I'm not going to show you every step of the drawing. I'm just going to cut to areas. I'm going to go ahead and stop here so that you can get caught up, because it does take time to do an outline, to draw all that information, and then to start to fill in those shadow areas. We are going to revisit this at our next class.